Greetings gentlemen, and that one woman that keeps watching my videos. Today we're going to talk about the 4 things that you should do in order to make your interior scenes look better. I'm not going to go into the modeling aspect of it, but rather just the theory behind it, what you should do in order to make it look better, as I said. So, tip number 1 is use denoising. I have seen many renders still that don't use denoising for the interiors. For instance, look at this scene here. It uses 1000 samples, it takes over 40 minutes to render, and it still is noisy. You would need to crank up the sample count to about, I don't know, 3 or 4000 in order to make it look really clean, and still then I think you would have some fireflies flying around. So really, look at this. This uses 400 samples and open image denoise. And while we're talking about that, I would suggest that you use open image denoise if you have an AMD graphics card like me, and that you use optics or NVIDIA graphics cards, because that usually gives you the best results. And while we're at the topic of noise, I want to tell you that you should add noise after denoising, and while that might sound stupid, let me show you why. First, look at this example that I've shown you before. You can see that the noise in some areas is really dominant and prominent, and that the noise in other areas really isn't there. But when you take a picture with a camera, you can usually see that the noise is really evenly distributed along the whole image. And that is because you have something that is called ISO on a camera, and that is really the sensitivity of the camera, and that gives you usually a little bit of monochromatic noise and color noise. So what is monochromatic noise and what is color noise? Monochromatic noise is usually what you would refer to as having one pixel that is really dark next to one pixel that is really bright. And that is usually the form of static noise that you sometimes see in old movies where the TV starts to flicker. So let me show you how you can add that in Adobe Photoshop. So now here we have a nice little scene. It uses 400 samples and denoising, as you can see. It looks really clean. But now we want to add some noise. So how do we do that? We add another layer. Now we press Shift and Backspace, and here you can choose 50% gray. If you're using GIMP, then just go here. You should have like the same color swatch on the left side in GIMP, and then just choose brightness to be 50%, saturation 0, and hue can be whatever you want. And then you just fill a layer with that. But now that we've done that, we select that layer, we go to Filter, and then Noise, add noise. And now you can see that we already have that uniform noise. You can change it to Gaussian noise, which would make it a little bit more sharp. You can change it to monochromatic, but you don't need to, because the monochromatic noise is inside of the color noise, so you can just press OK. And now what we need to do is set it to soft light. And after doing that, you can see that it looks absolutely garbage, because there is just too much noise. So what we can do is set this here to 60% or even 40%, and then you would see that it looks a whole lot more natural. Of course, you could blur it, because no noise is actually 100% crisp. So once we go to blur and then Gaussian blur, you can see that it looks a little bit better. Let's set it to, I don't know, 0.5 pixels, not 5 but 0.5, and that looks a whole lot better. So now tip number 3 is to add a volume to your scene. So in my case, I have used this little box here, which I have made a little bit bigger than my scene. Not here, because you won't see that part anyways, but what I did to it was just add a principled volume with the density set to something really low, because you don't want it to be foggy inside, but you just want that little bit of mist, and here's the difference it makes on the screen. You can see that the light just passes through the volume and leaves those God rays, or those streaks, going through the scene, and I think that looks really good, and that simulates the dust that is flying around through your little room. You might not notice it, but it's still there, and it's really prominent in really dusty areas, but every room has it, and you should do it, especially if you have a curtain in front of your window, because then it will be a lot more prominent. Now for tip number 4, just add stuff. As you can see on my screen, I have a lot of stuff lying around. I have those perfumes, I even have a soap dispenser, which tells you that you don't even need to match the stuff that you put into your drawers that perfectly, because, well, you can just put something in there as long as the majority of the stuff fits where you put it. You can have one or two elements that don't actually fit there. Like for instance, that little soap dispenser, as I said, and the more details you have, the less you have to work on each and every detail. Like for instance, look at this mouse, it looks absolutely garbage, but you wouldn't even notice it, because look at the scene as a whole. Even if you look at the mouse, your eyes just have to focus on so much stuff at once that you don't even notice that it's not really highly detailed, that it doesn't have that nice texture. So the more detail you add, the more your eyes have to focus on, and the more realistic things are going to look. Like for instance, look at this. This box here doesn't even have a lid. Do you notice it? Absolutely not. I bet you haven't noticed it until I told you, because there's just so much stuff lying around, and this isn't even a scene that is filled to the brim. I could add a chair here, I could add a lot more stuff onto the table, I could add a lot more stuff into the drawers and those little spaces here, and then it would be even better. I could put a PC here, a proper one, but I bet you haven't even noticed that there is no PC to power the monitor and no cables flying around here. But let me just tell you, the more stuff you add, the better it is. So just don't overdo it. There is certainly a limit. So like for instance, if you look at this left side here, I've added this little wooden thing here, this symbol of life. I think it's Celtic, because the wall on the left side looked a little empty, but there is still a big patch that is empty, but that isn't a problem. Emptiness in a scene isn't always a problem, but you should try to fill in some areas with small details like that in order to make it look better. Also, make sure that stuff is actually making sense. So I have put a little tiny nail here. I don't even know if you can see it in the final render, but the more details you have, the better it's going to look. So I hope you liked this video. It is a little bit of a different type of video than I usually make, but I'm trying out some new stuff. Make sure to let me know what you think about it, and maybe watch some other videos on my channel. Yeah, so I will see you in the next one. See ya, bye.